Jesus did not fulfill any prophecies, any but one. Just one. Stay tuned. I have my friend Stephen Ford joining me. Like the video, share the videos. I can't wait to cover this content with you. Stephen, welcome to MythVision, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Derek. It's nice to be on.
Absolutely. For those who don't know, Stephen has helped contribute on some of the documentaries in the past that we've produced with the scripting side of things, and even in some cases, actually creating some of the documentaries yourself with your own artistic abilities. And some of them had to do with the topic we're dealing with today. So we need to let people know, those you've been part of some of the projects. I also want to show people you have a YouTube channel you haven't done much with yet, but 492 subscribers. Let's get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers, ladies and gentlemen. We got to bump them up, right? Wolf of Wall Street in this biz. Stephen, we're also planning hopefully to accomplish a book together, or books, plural. Yeah. We gotta get this information out there, man.
The work in progress.
Literally.
It's looking really good so far.
It is.
Got some interesting stuff to bring out.
I think so. Most of the stuff people don't know about. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff you've even recognized some scholars don't maybe look at. And that's when, we're doing some really good work, when interesting observations. Real quick before we begin, I think it's worth noting you have something that's peer reviewed in the process right now, and past peer review, and it's going to probably overlap with some of the material we discussed today.
Yes, I have been working on a paper specifically about Psalm 22:16, and I've been working on it for about a year now. It's been nearly a year, and it's gone through the peer review process, and I've finished revising it, and so it's in the final stages. I've been waiting for 5 months to get this finished up, so I'm pretty excited about it. But it's related to the topic, of course. Psalm 22:16 is one of the most famous prophecies that almost every apologist brings up. That's one of the big ones, like top 3.
Yeah, it's like, to me, it's kind of funny. Like he will die. Everybody died. No, I'm kidding. No, but seriously, my wife asked me when I said, "Hey, we're doing a live stream," and I was just eating some ramen noodles before I was getting on here and just need something, in my stomach. I said, it's titled, Jesus did not fulfill any prophecies but one. And she's like, which one did he fulfill then? She wants to know. I'm like, all right, the title's working then, good. So if you're watching, stay tuned. Stephen, you told me when we wanted to do a presentation on this that you're like, let's do it on this topic, because this is a very important topic for people who are Christian, non-Christian, especially in the counter-apologetic area.
Yeah.
Where Christians claim Jesus fulfilled so many freaking prophecies, it's not even funny. More than you're going to say that he fulfilled. Some sites say more, some say less, whatever. But how do you want to begin this?
Yeah, so this is probably one of the oldest arguments, one of the earliest arguments, I should say, that Christian apologists have used all the way back in the beginning. The very early history, right after Christianity took off, the earliest apologists like Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Clement, they were using the prophecies argument heavily, arguing that the Old Testament predicted Jesus specifically as the Messiah, because they were trying to win over the Jews who rejected Jesus as the Messiah. So this was the argument that was most likely to convince a Jewish person who did not believe in Jesus, like, your own scriptures prove that Jesus is the Messiah. Your own scriptures point specifically to Jesus, and they show them all these proof texts. That was the strategy that they used at the very beginning.
Like Justin Martyr is arguing with a lot of scholars think a hypothetical Jew who doesn't even exist, that he's debating in his literature. And then we end up going down the road a little bit. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the church father that pieced together the Septuagint material to try and combat against a lot of the Jewish apologists at the time that they were
Origin. Yeah.
What's the name of it? Is it Stromata?
The Hexapla.
The Hexapla.
Stromata.
Yeah. Where the hell
was Stromata is a different work. That's by Clement of Alexandria.
Okay. Yeah.
Stromata. And I think in that work, Clement also discusses prophecies. So all of these early Christians, these church fathers, the patristic literature, they rely heavily. They lean hard into the prophecies argument. That's their biggest one.
Yeah.
Origen was. He was an incredibly prolific writer with his Hexapla, especially, where he compiled like 4 or 5 different translations. I forget how many, and put them side by side and everything. And that was a monumental work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, take us in, man, because clearly prophecy is a big deal. You've started off by pointing out the earliest apologists are using the prophecy argument. I noticed they use it even with pagan parallels. They're like, well, we have prophecies that explain why this looks so similar to other figures like Caesar and Dionysus and Hermes, and the list goes on and on.
Typology.
But they're demonic. Yeah.
The whole typology thing.
Exactly.
So I wanted to start this off by asking a question. How many prophecies did Jesus supposedly fulfill? There isn't a straightforward answer to this. If you ask any Christian, they can't give you a single answer. Some say, dozen prophecies. Some say, 40, 50. Some say hundreds. So, for example, Peter Stoner. Do you know who Peter Stoner is?
I don't.
He's the one who made that argument in his book Science Speaks, where he did the probability thing, where if you covered the state of Texas.
I've heard of this.
Yes, you cover the whole state of Texas in silver dollars, and like 2 feet deep or something, and then you pick one at random. That's how unlikely it is that Jesus just fulfilled 8 prophecies.
Right.
So
right.
He gives a list of 8. His favorite 8, the ones that he thinks are the biggest ones, are the most compelling, So he gives 8. James Rochford, who is an apologist, who does the website Evidence Unseen. That's his website. He lists 33 prophecies. Fred John Meldau, who is one of the 33. Fred John Meldau listed 41 prophecies. He was an apologist from the 50s, and Josh McDowell listed 61 in his book "Evidence That Demands a Verdict." J. Barton Payne was one of the earliest apologists who compiled a huge list of prophecies, like more than 100.
Is there should I be presenting this and showing people?
Yeah. So go ahead and go to the slide.
This here. Okay. And then here we are.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
All right. All right. So we have Peter Stoner here. He gives 8, but he also acknowledges that, he says some scholars have found as many as 300. But he presents 8 that he finds the most compelling. And then James Rochford, he has 33. Fred John Meldau has 41. Josh McDowell, of course, everyone knows Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. He lists 61. And J. Barton Payne, he was a scholar from the 70s. He was actually the first that we know of, or at least that I could find, that actually gives a comprehensive list of more than 100 prophecies. He does 114. So ask any Christian, consult any Christian author. They will give you different numbers of prophecies. There's no consistent number. If you ask them how many prophecies did Jesus fulfill, there's no consistent answer. And you might be thinking, well, what? We could make this simple. Just go to the New Testament, right? How many prophecies does the New Testament explicitly quote as Jesus having fulfilled? How many do you think that would be?
Well, I'm looking at the chart here.
Oh,
and it
yeah.
says
I already
47.
have it up. Yeah, I already have it up. So the New Testament lists 47, which is, probably most apologists would be like, yeah, that's a fine number, 47. Okay, so just go with the New Testament,
Yeah,
but
why all these other numbers? Yeah.
yeah, but here's the problem though. 47, those 47 prophecies don't include a lot of the big ones, like Psalm 22:16, the supposedly translated, "They pierced my hands and my feet," which is regarded as the most explicit prophecy of Jesus' crucifixion. That one's not in the New Testament, and not in the New Testament at all.
Is there a way to mute the phone? It's super loud. I don't know if that's possible or not. It's like bing, like in my ear, and I imagine the viewers might hear it too. I don't know if that's possible. Is it in your phone? Is it in your computer?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you have one of those synced up computers.
Yeah.
The ding is killing me. People are saying.
Wow.
They're just listen. He's trying to wake you up so you can see the prophecies that aren't real. There it goes again.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, did you turn it off?
Why? I don't know how to turn it off.
Huh.
Okay. I did hide alerts.
There you go. That we predict that we can enjoy the show now and the prophecy will be fulfilled. Sorry, everybody. We're getting it.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Message received sound. None. Okay.
Boom.
Okay.
Okay.
Problem solved. Sorry about that.
You're fine. So, okay. All right. So I'm going to bounce back and then you say next slide. I'll come back to the slides. That way people can see us communicate here. So your point is that some of the big ones like Psalm 22 is not even in the New Testament, yet it's used by Christians all the time.
Yeah. So, you could just limit the number of prophecies to 47 because that's the number that the New Testament gives. It doesn't actually say that there's 47 prophecies, but if you go through everything that the New Testament quotes, you get about 47. That's what I got at least. But these don't include Psalm 22:16, which is one of the biggest ones. They also don't include Daniel 9. The Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy, that's not quoted in the New Testament at all. And they don't include, there's a whole bunch they don't include. But so we also get this claim from a lot of apologists that Jesus fulfilled more than 300 prophecies. And this is, extraordinary claim, obviously. Like if that's true, then dang, we got a we got a big probability question here. So
yeah,
you can go to the next slide here. All right, not all apologists agree that Jesus fulfilled 300 prophecies. Actually, James Rochford, who I mentioned earlier, he has this quote that I found. He says, "We contend that Christian apologists have been guilty of overstating their case in regard to the predictions found in the Old Testament. Often Christians will say that Jesus of Nazareth fulfilled 300 predictions from the Old Testament, and Jesus' fulfillment is incredibly improbable. We think it is wiser to be more conservative in our claims, pointing to only those passages that have evidential weight rather than those that do not." And now this is interesting. He gives 3 examples of the ones that he thinks are the strongest. We believe that Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and Daniel 9, 24 through 27 have strong evidential weight for skeptical thinkers. And notice this is the 2 of the 3 passages he quotes or mentions. They're the ones that the New Testament doesn't quote at all. Only Isaiah 53 is the one that you find in the New Testament, but the New Testament doesn't quote Psalm 22:16 or Daniel 9 as predictions of Jesus. So that's interesting because you can see that not all apologists agree with this extraordinary 300 prophecies claim. So, all right. So the 300 prophecies list, I've actually done a lot of investigating on this list, and it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible the ways that they stretch out.
When you say incredible, you mean not credible.
Yeah, literally incredible.
Literally.
You know, you hear this and you think, wow, 300 prophecies, but then you look at it and you're like, okay, you see verses repeated like 4, 5, 6, 7 different times. You see verses split up in, you know, with each little, with every word, literally every word counted as a separate prediction. You see passages that are literally identical in 2 different books, you know, like we have in, you know, 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and identical verses counted as 2 separate predictions. You even see verses interpreted in multiple different ways, and those different interpretations counted as separate predictions.
Mm-hmm.
So they use every single trick in the book to stretch these out. And like, for example, let's take Isaiah 53, for example. How many prophecies do you think these apologists would stretch, would milk Isaiah 53 for?
Well, can I tell them our conversation prior to the stream?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
caught me off guard. I was heating up my noodles, and I was like on the phone with you, and I was like, I don't know, I'm gonna aim high. I said 10, and you were like, no. So go ahead.
43.
Whew.
That's more than double the number of verses in the whole passage, in the whole Isaiah 53 passage. 43 separate predictions is what they count. And when you go through all those 43, you see that they've really they're very loose with their interpretation. They repeat the same prediction multiple times within the same passage. So It's not like they're saying, okay, 2 different passages are making the same prediction. No, they're saying, oh, different parts of the same passage make the same prediction. That counts as 2 separate prophecies, or 3 or 4, or, you know, what have you.
Right.
But it's, you know, they use every single trick in the book to do this. And I've been studying these lists of 300 prophecies for a long time now. And what I've found, I'll give you just some basic stats here. So some of the prophecies are not even like some of the prophecies listed in these websites that give these long lists.
Yeah.
They include things that apologists don't even believe that Jesus fulfilled in the past, like things that he's supposed to fulfill when he comes back in the second coming, right? That accounts for about 13% of these lists. These are
counting them, but they haven't happened yet.
These are predictions that are being counted, even though Jesus hasn't done them yet.
Right.
Things like, oh, he's gonna bring judgment to the earth and he's gonna reign forever. Things like that accounts for about 13%. Theological claims, these are just statements about Jesus that are not verifiable, like, oh, he's the Son of God, for example. You can't verify that, or you can't prove it or disprove it. Thank you. You can't prove or disprove theological statements like, he's the good shepherd, he's the bread of life, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Those kinds of claims account for, what do you think it is?
Well, you got me wanting to aim higher than normal based on our prior encounter. I'm going to go with 20% this time.
39%.
Ooh, you keep
39% of these huge lists are just theological statements like, oh, he's the bread of life, he's the good shepherd, he's the Son of God, he's whatever. Yeah. So
combining those two, you're almost at 50% of like fluff.
Yeah, there's so much fluff. It's insane. Repeated verses account for 27%. That's a separate. That's not in addition to the 39% and the 13%. That's like a separate, reckoning that I did. But so 27% are just repeated verses. 13% are not fulfilled, are not things that Christians even believe that Jesus fulfilled already. They're things that they think he's going to fulfill in the future. And 39% are just completely unverifiable. So yeah, that's just gives you a rough idea of how much fluff is in here. So, all right. So I agree with James Rochford, a Christian apologist, who says that, the 300 prophecies number is overstating the case. Now, let's get to. So I have 12 fatal flaws that I came up with. Basically 12 big problems with the prophecies argument, just in general. All right.
Got it.
And rather than going through each prophecy one by one, I decided to just go through each fallacy one by one and just give some prophecies as examples,
Okay.
So the first one is apologists do not agree with each other about which passages count as real prophecies.
And when you say apologists too, you're not just talking about modern, you're talking about historical fathers that are apologists. Got it.
I'm talking about the entire history of Christianity, from modern apologists to apologists like Peter Stoner from the 50s and 60s, even apologists from the 1800s, even apologists from the 1500s like John Calvin. Okay, so the first one, this is the biggest one. Zechariah 13:6. So this is a verse that alludes to a figure who is saying, wait, let me see if I have the quote. Is the quote in the slides?
I didn't know if I don't think it brought up the quote in the slide.
Let's see here. Wait.
No, and by the way, it's definitely shrinking the quotes. So the HTML I have has like the bigger quotes. Should I try and share that one?
No, this is fine.
Okay.
So this is the way the verse goes, basically. This is Peter Stoner's quote. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thy hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. So this is a verse that sounds a lot like it's talking about Jesus. It's talking about he was wounded in his hands, and this happened in the house of his friends. So it sounds like it's saying that he was wounded by people who were supposed to be his friends, like his fellow Jews. That sounds like a prediction of Jesus being wrongfully crucified by his fellow Jews. So. But here's the problem. The passage is, it's talking about a false prophet who was wounded, or an idol worshiper who has wounds on his hands or his arms because of their self-inflicted cuts, like ancient pagans sometimes did. You can see the prophets of Baal did this in the Old Testament when they were having that competition with Elijah. They sliced their arms, their bodies up, as part of a ritual. So that's what this verse is about in context. And most apologists nowadays are actually embarrassed about this verse. That it's become a big problem. And you can see, is the Michael Brown quote on here? Yeah. Only partial. I'll just read the full quote for you. This is what Michael Brown says. He sums it up perfectly. I must admit that some Messianic Jews and Christians have been their own worst enemies here, getting excited about some English renderings of Zechariah 13:6 and immediately saying to themselves, that's Jesus. That's a prophecy about Jesus. Consequently, they have used this verse as a Messianic proof text, giving the anti-missionaries something embarrassing and erroneous to expose. This passage has nothing to do with Yeshua, and it is not Messianic in any sense of the word.
Damn.
And so you see, let's see, John Calvin. I have a quote from John Calvin here. Some apply this to Christ because Zechariah has mentioned wounds on the hands, but this is very puerile, for it is quite evident that he speaks here of false teachers who had for a time falsely pretended God's name. And then they say that they were friends by whom, and then they say that they were friends by whom they were smitten. They acknowledge themselves worthy of such punishment and murmur not. So John Calvin disagrees with this. Michael Brown disagrees with this. And most modern apologists, when you look at their books that talk about the messianic prophecies, they just leave this verse out because it's an embarrassment. It's something that it was once popular before.
It's a perfect test, though, because even having look, you haven't even brought any of your personal skeptical beliefs to fore here. You're literally just showing, look at what other apologists say about these prophecies you Christians are using. And for me, the fact that so many Christians can read like a Pesher-like thing in the middle of a sentence, completely irrelevant of the context. They don't care what the context is, but they could find something that gives an illusion of some parallel they find in Christ, and then they're able to slap that as a prophecy onto Jesus. Tells you that it's so subjective what they're doing to begin with in trying to say this is fulfilling Jesus.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. The whole thing, the Zechariah 13:6 thing, the same apologists, or the same strategy that some apologists have used to make this a prophecy about Jesus. This is something that they do with lots of other passages. And, apologists like Michael Brown, they have refuted this and, admitted that this is a problem, but then they do the same thing for other passages.
Exactly.
And okay, so you admit that this verse was taken out of context and applied to Jesus when it's not about Jesus. But then you're going to do the same thing with other passages.
Bingo. And
you're going to think that those are valid, but this one's not. Yeah.
This one's a pretty obvious embarrassment. I mean, let's be honest. It's like pulling I don't know. It's an embarrassing situation. The guy isn't even a noble, righteous person. He's an evildoer. He's a false idol worshiper. So I could see why some Christians would go, guys, stop using that one. But the fact that some Christians did see it in there is a red flag for me to begin with. The whole operation. The whole operation is just non-starter.
We need to keep this in mind moving forward, that this is something that Christians themselves admit is a problem, taking verses out of context and applying them to Jesus when they should not be applied to Jesus. This is something that Christians admit is a bad thing, basically. Right? But it's interesting, people talk about Peter Stoner all the time. They talk about that whole, covering the state of Texas with silver dollars thing, and then picking one at random, and that's the odds of Jesus fulfilling all these prophecies. And he gives 8 prophecies, right? Zechariah 13:6 is one of those 8 prophecies.
Oh my God! I got to give you a little context here because this is personally relevant. I didn't tell you this on the phone.
Yeah.
I was at youth group at a public school in North Carolina. They allowed this group called Trojans for Christ. If anyone from my high school, Pine Forest High School in North Carolina, ever hears this, they'll know what I'm talking about. Our mascot was a Trojan, representing the Trojans from, the Trojan War, the mascot with the Trojan symbol. We also had the highest teenage pregnancy rate. So we had an internal joke about, we're not wearing any Trojans, obviously, but our mascot is the Trojan. So, but we would go to this Trojans for Christ each morning, this little Christian get together music and fellowship thing. And they'd have this outsider guy who came in one day and he's preaching this very point. And he says, if you took a silver dollar bill, whatever, painted it red and then covered the whole state of Texas and you had it however many feet deep,
I think it's 2 feet deep,
some ridiculous depth, the entire state of Texas, blindfold an individual and tell that individual to walk the state of Texas and just randomly go down and pick up the coin, that is how statistically improbable it would be that this guy would fulfill these prophecies, and Jesus did.
These 8 prophecies.
Only 8.
These 8 prophecies, and one of them is this prophecy that's now an embarrassment to apologists.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I bought it. I'm like, oh wow, my Lord's even more convincing. At the time I was definitely into it.
Yeah, and I can actually illustrate how much of an embarrassment this is. I was looking through Josh McDowell's book, Science Speaks, right? Sorry, that's Peter Stoner's book, Science Speaks. Josh McDowell's book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, right?
Okay.
He lists these 61 prophecies, all right? And he numbers them too, which is helpful. But he also talks about Peter Stoner, and he talks about Peter Stoner's probability. It's a ridiculously absurdly improbable number. And he briefly mentions the 8 prophecies that Peter Stoner gives. But when it comes to Zechariah 13:6, he changes it. He changes that item that Peter Stoner used. Peter Stoner used Zechariah 13:6. He changes. I think it's like number 4 on Peter Stoner's list. Yeah. McDowell replaces Zechariah 13:6 with Psalm 41:9 and Psalm 22:16.
Huh. It's almost like he knew.
So he's trying to hide it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
This is Josh McDowell, the famous apologist, of course. And so this is something that Christian apologists don't like to admit or talk about or acknowledge. Michael L. Brown kind of implies that it's only uneducated or less informed Christians who cite Zechariah 13:6. Like the better informed, more educated Christians, they know that this isn't really a prophecy of Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Because
hit that like button, fam.
Guess who else cited Zechariah 13:6? Thomas Aquinas.
Kind of a big, intelligent figure, think, right?
Yeah. In the college I went to, I had a friend who was a big time Thomas Aquinas fan. He read everything that Thomas Aquinas wrote, and he was big into Thomas Aquinas. Well, Thomas Aquinas himself regarded this as a valid prophecy of Jesus. So you can't really say that it's only the uneducated Christians who think that. Besides Thomas Aquinas, you also have Albert Barnes and Charles Ward Smith. He's actually a modern Christian. He wrote a commentary in 2014, and Fred John Mildow, who's he was a big time apologist in the 50s and 60s. So major apologists cite Zechariah 13:6 as a real prophecy of Jesus. So you can't pretend that this is just something that uneducated Christians think.
Good point.
Anyway, now I'm going to bring up another one, and this one is very interesting because I don't think very many people know about this.
Okay.
But there is a passage that we see a lot, or at least I've found a lot when looking through the the patristic literature. The church fathers Tertullian and Justin Martyr. They cite this, or they quote this prophecy. It says, "Say among the nations, the Lord reigns from the tree. Yes, the world is established; it shall never be moved." The Lord reigns from the tree. That's interesting. Have you heard that one before, Derek?
The Lord reigns from the tree.
The Lord reigns from the tree. Have you ever heard that before? I don't hear very many modern apologists quoting that text.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty interesting one, right?
Right.
The Lord reigns from the tree. That's strange, and it kind of sounds like it's talking about Jesus, right? He was crucified. That was his glorified state, according to the Gospels. He reigns from the cross, basically. Well, there's a reason that modern apologists don't bring up this passage, and it's because it doesn't exist. It literally doesn't exist. And we have the quotes up here.
Okay, hold on. Let me show him again. Yeah.
Yeah, this is from Tertullian. He quotes it. Let's see. Come now, when you read the words of David, how that the Lord reigns from the tree, I want to know what you understand by it. Perhaps you think some wooden king of the Jews is meant, and not Christ, who overcame death by his suffering on the cross and thence reigned. Now, although death reigned from Adam even to Christ, why may not Christ be said to have reigned from the tree, from his having shut up the kingdom of death by dying on the tree of his cross? So Tertullian is challenging, his this is in against Marcion. So in his he's challenging Marcion or the fans of Marcion by positing this challenge, this question. What do you make of this verse? I mean, this is clearly about Jesus, right? How would you explain this? Well, Justin Martyr, when you look at his dialogue with Tryphil, he he complains. He's complaining here in dialogue with Tryphil 73 that the Jews have taken this line from the tree or from the wood out of the text. The Jews edited it out. They didn't like it, so they removed it. He complains. He says, and from the 96th Psalm, they have taken away this short saying of the words of David, from the wood. For when the passage said, tell among the nations, the Lord has reigned from the wood, they have left, tell among the nations, the Lord has reigned. Now, one of your people has ever been said to have reigned as God and Lord among the nations, with the exception of him only who was crucified. So you can see he's complaining here, thinking that this was some kind of plot by Jewish scribes to remove this clear prophecy of Jesus. Here's the problem with that, though. There is no evidence whatsoever that this was a reading in any version of Psalm 96 in existence. This is not in the Septuagint. This is not in the Masoretic text. This is not in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is not in the Peshitta. This is not in the Vulgate. This reading does not exist, literally. But this is something that multiple church fathers, not just these two, but also Origen, I believe Augustine, multiple church fathers cite this verse as, holy crap, this is a big deal. This is clearly about Jesus. Doesn't exist.
Jeez. That's a big deal. I mean, we can fact check that with the Dead Sea Scrolls and see, hey, this is way older, because if he's trying to argue this in the 150s, they removed it. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls are centuries earlier. Yeah. And what did they? Not there either. Yeah, what's your evidence? So this is something I do want to cover at some point, not to derail. I want to keep going. But I just want to go through some of these earliest church fathers and show you how ridiculous some of their statements and claims are. I'm talking about they make up stuff. They're very commonly making up things all the time. And I want to show people that you really need to be, if these are the fathers in your tradition that are doing it. So not only do they cite prophecies that don't exist, they also have lots of interpretations and translations, variant readings that completely disagree with modern apologist interpretations or translations. And we're going to get into that later. But I think that's all I have for this first section. Okay. Go to that slide. Okay, so this is the real verse. The real verse says, saying among the nations the Lord reigns, yet the world is established. And the one that the church fathers are citing is this strange variant that says the Lord reigns from the tree. That doesn't exist. We don't have any evidence of that. That's not in the Septuagint or anything or any other source. So this is probably just might have been some kind of gloss that was circulating in some Christian communities, but this is not one of the translations.
Jeez. Yeah. All right. So number 2, disputed translation. So this is another big flaw with the prophecies argument in general, is that a lot of the time the predictions cited require readings of verses that are either disputed or they're completely erroneous. All right, and I have three. Let's start with Psalm 22:16.
Okay.
Psalm 22:16 is a big.
I don't know if I should just turn here or let's wait. Okay.
Yeah, let's wait. Okay. All right. So Psalm 22:16 is this passage that in the Masoretic text it reads, "Like a lion, my hands, my feet," and in most Christian Bibles it reads, "They have pierced my hands, my feet." So this is regarded as a clear prediction of Jesus, because of course. King David, when did King David have his hands and feet pierced? Obviously, that's a description of crucifixion, right? And well, the problem is that this reading, this verb, "they pierced," is a complete mistranslation. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist anywhere. In fact, it doesn't exist in any of the ancient sources. It doesn't exist in the Masoretic text. First of all, it doesn't exist in the Septuagint. It doesn't exist in the Vulgate. It doesn't exist in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It doesn't exist in the Peshitta. It doesn't exist anywhere.
You want me to show that the visual chart that?
Yeah, do you have that?
I do, and I think that's necessary right now. Yeah. By the way, you have some work coming out. We can't say everything about this, but you have some real good work that is relevant to this very topic, and you track every time this text is used in history.
Yes.
Down to when it first introduces the piercing interpretation.
Right.
And I don't want to say more than that if you don't feel comfortable saying more than that.
Yeah, no, I'll talk a little bit about it.
Okay.
If you ask most people, whether Christian or non-Christian, or Jewish, atheist, whatever, anyone who's really looked into this question of the pierced reading, they'll, Christians of course say that pierced is attested in the Septuagint and in the Vulgate, and in the Peshitta. That's what they claim, that these old ancient readings say pierced. But if you really look into it, you can see that they actually don't. The Septuagint uses this word orixen, which is the normal Greek word for dug. Right? It does not mean pierced; it means dug, and that there's a difference between piercing something and digging. You don't pierce a grave, you don't pierce a well, you dig a grave, you dig a well. This is the word used for digging wells, digging graves, digging vineyards, plowing the soil. That's the word used here in the Septuagint's translation of Psalm 22:16.
Gotcha.
So the Oxford translation of the Septuagint uses the word gouge. They gouged my hands and feet. That's kind of a more interpretive translation to kind of make it make sense, because dug my hands and my feet, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's such a weird reading. They dug my hands and my feet. What does that mean, right? But that's literally what the word means. That's what the word means. They dug my hands and my feet. So, and this is probably based on some Hebrew readings, like the ones found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's two readings found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's Ka'aru and there's Karu, and both of them, well, the meanings are disputed. Scholars have actually about 6 or 7 different theories about what the word Karu means, and but probably the most common understanding is that this is derived from the Hebrew root kara, which means to cut or to dig. So again, this is the normal Hebrew word for dig. Sometimes it means cut, like cut a tomb out of a rock, basically. That's the sense here. It does not mean pierce. That's a different. There are different Hebrew words like ratza, which mean pierce. And so we have this. The Septuagint says they dug my hands and my feet. The Dead Sea Scrolls probably say they dug my hands and my feet. And let's see here. A photoront, right. So we have Jerome's translation, photoront, manos meus et pedis. And this is one that there's a misconception here, because I often see, secular scholars, well, not necessarily scholars, but, kind of secular leaning intellectuals say that probably Jerome's Vulgate was the one that started the pierced reading. It was the Latin Vulgate. That's the one that changed. They dug my hands and my feet to they pierced my hands and my feet. But the thing is, photoront does not mean they pierced. Photoront derives from the Latin word fodio, which is the normal Latin word for dig. If you wanted to say, I'm going to dig a well or I'm going to dig a grave, you would use the word fodio. And in fact, the English word fossil is derived from fodio. It means dug up. So this word literally just means they dug my hands and my feet. So again, we have this weird reading, they dug my hands and my feet. That's the most common translation in the early sources. Of course, you have some variant readings, like Aquila has, they disfigured my hands and my feet, or they have bound my hands and my feet. Disfigured my hands and my feet, that might be based on a Hebrew manuscript that we don't have anymore, or it might be an interpretation to try to make sense, because it's weird having that reading, they dug my hands and my feet. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And then, we have, right. So here's something interesting. The church fathers knew that photoront did not mean they pierced. And here's how we know that they knew that it didn't mean pierce, because when they quote the church fathers who are writing before the Vulgate, they quote Psalm 22:16, but they word it their own way, because they're writing in Latin, but the Vulgate hasn't been created yet. That came from the 4th century. So there's no standard Latin version yet. So they're paraphrasing, or they're using their own kind of translations / interpretations. None of them use words meaning pierce. They use, for example, Tertullian uses photoront, and then he uses exterminaverant. They have destroyed my hands and my feet. Cyprian is a 3rd century North African writer. He uses ephoderant. They tore my hands and my feet. And there's another church father who also uses ephoderant. Who is that? I don't have that one. Yeah. Lectanius, I think his name is. Anyway, so the point is that the church fathers who were writing in Latin, they knew that photoront and the Septuagint's rendering did not mean they pierced my hands and my feet. None of them, when they paraphrase the verse, none of them paraphrase it using a verb in Latin that actually means pierce. They use all kinds of different verbs. They destroyed, they tore. The Peshitta uses a verb that can mean cut or wound or something along those lines. It doesn't mean pierce, even though sometimes the Peshitta is translated as saying they pierced my hands and my feet. It actually is not that specific. But anyway, and then this question, because modern Bibles all say they pierced my hands and my feet, well, not all of them, but most of them, the NIV, the King James, the ESV, So at some point, Christian Bibles started using pierce for this verse, Psalm 22:16. They changed it from they dug my hands and my feet to they pierced my hands and my feet. Mm-hmm. And it was driving me crazy, because I wanted to know when this happened. And I've looked at over 100 early translations of this verse, from 11 different languages, and almost all of them from the Middle Ages they dug my hands, my feet. It isn't until like the late Middle Ages that we start to get the first translations, the earliest translations that say they pierced my hands and my feet. Yeah. And
if I may, just because I know you're going to get into some of the fathers and some of this apologetic stuff with prophecy, but as for the viewer who's watching, what has been your outcome in terms of what was the original intent meant? Because it's a strange sounding.
Yeah, they dug my hands, my feet. That's interesting, because you might think, okay, well, maybe they just knew that dug kind of meant the same thing as pierced,
right,
whatever. But we know that they actually did not interpret it that way. And I have a couple quotes here. I think there's slides of those, right?
Let me pull them up. This is Church Fathers, right? Or Tertullian, Cyprian of Carthage.
Can you go to the next slide? Let me see. Nope, that's not. Okay, go back. All right, so I have the quotes here. I'll just read them.
Okay, I'll put me back up.
Yeah, sure. So this is a quote first from Cassiodorus. He is an early medieval writer who did a commentary on the Psalms in the 6th century. Okay, so he's pretty early. Later than Augustine, but earlier than Aquinas. So he writes this: "They have dug my hands and my feet. Though there seems to be here simply and literally an account of the Lord's passion, this action indicates something which we should interpret also on the spiritual level. We must not take dug in its literal meaning, for the earth gives life to various offshoots when known to have been plowed by the eager work of men. This happened in the case of the Lord Savior's body, for when it was fastened with nails and pierced with a lance, it yielded for us fruit which would abide forever. So we do not now fear to say that God suffered in the flesh, that God died for the salvation of all." So he interprets this in a very spiritual way, that that they dug my hands and my feet is referring to something like the same way that the earth, when you plow the earth, like when you plow the soil, it produces fruit. Well, when Jesus' hands and feet were dug, that yielded the fruit of life.
Right.
It's a very, very spiritual interpretation. And we also find this in Peter Lombard's. Have you heard of Peter Lombard?
No, I think I've heard of him, but I don't know him.
So he is a 12th century, medieval commentator, also writing in Latin. He kind of compiled interpretations in his Glossa Magna, interpretations from earlier writers like Cassiodorus. And he says this. He says, "And note that he does not say they pierced or they wounded, but they dug. For just as the earth, when dug, produces fruit, so Christ, when wounded, gave the fruit of life." So he literally says, and this is back at a time when everyone, all the educated Christian, exegetes used Latin most of the time. Right. They wrote in Latin most of the time, and they knew Latin very well. And Peter Lombard is saying it does not say they pierced. He literally says it does not say they pierced. This is in his Glossa Magna.
Right.
It does not say they pierced. Transfixerunt, that's the Latin word he uses. It does not say transfixerunt. That's a word that would mean pierce.
Right.
But they dug, foderunt. That's what it says, foderunt. They dug. And then he uses Cassiodorus' explanation.
So if I may, just to chime in here, because it seems like you have evidence of important church Christian fathers who are educated, who clearly would have used this to mean pierced if it did mean that. And they're just saying, no, it doesn't mean that. So they're finding an agricultural way through a spiritual means to understand Christ. The question I have would be then, what do we do when we go back to the context of Psalms? Maybe I need to ask an expert in the ancient Near Eastern world what dug the hands and feet would have meant in Psalms' original context. Do you have something to say on that?
Yes, that's a very good question, and that's another thing that I've been obsessing over. What was the original verb?
Yeah.
And I don't think that it was kara. I don't think it was they dug my hands and my feet, even though that is the earliest attested translation. But there are lots of scholars who think that karu or ka'aru is either a uh, a textual an aberrant reading, like a scribal error, or it is a form of a rare word that maybe was borrowed from Akkadian or some other language, or cognate. So, for example, J.J.M. Roberts, in his article, A New Root for an Old Crux, he proposes this theory that the original word, the original verb was actually something like shriveled. My hands and my feet have shriveled. And I think that might actually be right, because it fits with the theme of the psalmist suffering from a terrible illness. He says, I can count on all my bones, which means that he's malnourished. He can see his own rib cage. So his saying my hands and my feet have shriveled, that kind of makes sense to me, that that might be the original.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
And there are a lot of other theories. Some scholars propose that it meant that the original word was bound. They bound my hands and my feet. That's plausible too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a common thing you do when your enemies try to subdue you. So
by enemies,
and I guess many have fulfilled that one then, I guess, prophecy wise, huh?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. Real quick, Solera Knight, thank you for the super chat. Whole idea of a would-be Messiah, a false religion. Whole idea of a would-be Messiah, a false religion. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I don't understand either.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting, Solera. Thanks so much for the super chat, though. I don't understand the question, my friend. Please continue. Do you want me to pull back up the
right? Well, so before we go to the next slide, I'm just going to point out here that the one thing I find interesting is that how Christians view the Masoretic text, because the Masoretic text says, like a lion, my hands and my feet. And, this Christians bash this translation all the time. They say that this is a corruption. It's either a deliberate corruption of the text or it's a scribal error, because like a lion, my hands and my feet doesn't make any sense. It's nonsense. It's ungrammatical. And the Masoretic text is so late, it dates to like this 10th century. So we can't trust the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text is, we should trust the Septuagint. The Septuagint is, way older. It's 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text. So when it comes to Psalm 22:16, they regularly bash the Masoretic text and say, no, we should just look at the Septuagint. Well, let's get to the next prophecy claim, Zechariah 11:13, where the Masoretic text is now all of a sudden great. Because here, the translation issue is exactly the opposite. The Christian apologists who cite this verse, they are completely dependent on a variant reading of the Masoretic text, which we are pretty sure was actually a corruption, and we have evidence that it was a corruption, right? So this verse, in most Christian Bibles, it's the 30 pieces of silver thing. The Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they value me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. So this is, of course, regarded as a prophecy of Judas, who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And then he returned the money when he went back to the chief priest, and he threw the money into the temple. And then that money was later taken by the chief priest and used to buy a potter's field. So it ultimately went to a potter. But the more secular translations of this verse say, "And then the Lord said to me, throw it into the treasury. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them into the treasury in the house of the Lord." That's the NRSV. So there's a tension here. What is the original translation of the verse? Is it supposed to be potter, or is it supposed to be treasury? Well, treasury kind of makes more sense, because when you are bringing silver to the temple, there is a temple treasury. But when you bring silver to the temple, what does a potter have to do with that? Where, like, what potter? Okay, so you're bringing money to the temple, and then you're going to give it to a potter there? Is there some kind of like temple worker who is a potter or something like that? So it really doesn't make much sense. But the Christian apologists need this to say potter, because they need it to be a prophecy. They need it to fit with the whole Judas thing, Mm-hmm. So, but in order for them to argue that it says potter, they have to rely completely on the Masoretic text, the one that they don't like because it renders Psalm 22:16 as like a lion.
Right.
This is the text. This is the only text that says potter, the only one. All right. Do you have the, what's the next slide say? Does it, right. So, first I want to read a quote real quick.
Okay. Coming to you full screen. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Oh, wait, I don't have it. Dang it.
Hit the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Hit the like button.
All right. Never mind. Okay, so I had a quote prepared for. Oh, here it is. Okay, I found it. All right, this is Abner Cho, who wrote a chapter on Zechariah in the Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy. Now, this is a huge book, the Moody Handbook of Messianic Prophecy. It talks about, all of the prophecies of Jesus in detail and stuff. And this is what he says. He says, likewise, the past view has serious problems. It has difficulty identifying the potter in Zechariah 11:13 to the point where it advocates changing the text to storehouse or treasury. However, such textual amendation is without any evidence. That's what he says. No evidence whatsoever. Slide, please.
Okay.
Here is the evidence. Every single text that you can find, every single ancient source that renders this verse, never says potter anywhere. They all use words that are either are like synonyms of treasury or storehouse, or related. The Septuagint has a strange translation. It says smelter. Throw the 30 pieces of silver into the smelter or the furnace. All right. But the Vulgate, Jerome's translation, says statuary, and the Targum, the Aramaic Targum, which is a paraphrase, it says sanctuary. So all of these are closer in meaning to treasury. It at least has to do with the temple. Potter is a completely bizarre reading. So, but from the previous slide, it showed that these two Hebrew words, treasury and potter, are very similar to each other. There's only one letter difference between them. So it would be very easy for a scribe to accidentally render the word differently and then produce this variant reading. But there is overwhelming evidence that the original word is not potter, that it was supposed to be either treasury or storehouse or something.
Right.
But this is another example where the Christian translators require the Masoretic text in order to make this a prophecy about Jesus. because if they use the Septuagint, they like the Septuagint when it comes to certain verses like Psalm 22:16, but for this verse, the Septuagint says, "Throw the 30 pieces of silver in the furnace," and that doesn't fit what happened when Judas betrayed Jesus. According to Matthew, he didn't throw the money in any furnace.
Right.
So this doesn't work with their.
Imagine having to pull from completely different source material to try and make your prophecies work. Yeah, but they'll do anything, anything to make it work. Anything to make it work. Yeah.
Next slide is. Do you have a slide on Jerome? No. Okay. This isn't the one that has. All right. So I actually have a quote from Jerome. I guess it didn't end up in the slides, but here's a quote. Jerome actually has this writing. It's Epistle 57. Another name for it is the letter of Pamachius or Pamachius. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. On the best method of translating, and this is a really interesting text because Jerome gets into the weeds a little bit because he's talking about problematic translations, where he's using the early sources, but he's not sure which one is right, and he's like comparing different translations with each other.
Right.
And here's what he says about Zechariah 11:13. He says, this passage is, well, first of all, of course, Matthew quotes this as Jeremiah, not Zechariah, which is another whole issue. But Jerome says this passage is not found in Jeremiah at all, but in Zechariah, in quite different words and in altogether different order. In fact, the Vulgate renders it as follows: "And I will say unto them, if it is good in your sight, give ye me a price or refuse it. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver, and the Lord said to me, put them into the melting furnace." And then he says, "It is evident that the rendering of the Septuagint differs widely from the quotation of the evangelist. In Hebrew also, though the sense is the same, the words are quite different and differently arranged." He's quoting from the Hebrew now. Listen to what he says. "And I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver, and the Lord said unto me, cast it unto the statuary," not potter.
Right.
Jerome himself says that the Hebrew text that he was working with did not say potter. It said statuary.
Wow. Problematic.
So, no evidence. Yeah, sure. There's no evidence that supports the potter reading, even though this is the reading that is required to make this a fulfillment.
Yeah. So where do you think Matthew got potter from then?
Oh, Matthew for sure had a textual variant that he was working with, or something that was circulating in some communities. The different communities had kind of collections of passages. Christian communities, they probably had these excerpts from different books of the Bible. Different passages that were commonly understood messianically, or referring to Jesus, and of course there could have been textual corruption in these lists, and it would make sense if Matthew got his version from one of these, not a full translation of Zechariah, but a couple passages here and there from Zechariah. And then maybe there were also passages from Jeremiah, and they were mixed together, and that would explain why he attributed it to Jeremiah instead of Zechariah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the maker of heaven and earth couldn't preserve that one, I guess. I'm just kidding. So okay. So next, I guess, is
All right. So the Septuagint. Okay, the Septuagint. This is a fun one. This is one of the main things I wanted to talk about here, because I don't know about you, but I often hear a lot about how the Septuagint is so much better of a translation than the Masoretic text. Christians often appeal to the Septuagint, especially for Psalm 22:16, which they think says pierce in the Septuagint, and of course Isaiah 7:14, which is where they get the virgin will conceive, the parthenos. That's where they get that, which they of course need for that to be a prophecy about the virgin birth. So the Septuagint is, often praised a little too highly by apologists for, they always talk about how it's so much earlier than the Masoretic text. The Septuagint is way better of a translation. It's the earliest translation. It is the earliest translation. That's a fact. But that exists, at least. We don't have anything earlier. But, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the more accurate translation. And we're going to see some examples of some problems with the Septuagint that I think that Christians need to really take seriously, because the Septuagint often is not good for them. So go to the next slide. Okay, so here are some examples. You've heard of the proto-evangelion, Derek?
Yep.
That's like regarded as the first prophecy of Jesus, like the first prophecy ever made, the proto-evangelion. That's Genesis 3:15. Supposedly, this is the first prophecy of Jesus that was given to Adam and Eve. God made this prophecy when talking to Adam and Eve right after they sinned and they ate the forbidden fruit. And then he cursed the serpent, and he said, hang on. Okay, he said, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Right? That's the first prophecy of Jesus. Very important, right?
Right.
And Christians interpret this as your offspring, the offspring of Eve, the entire human race, but they say that this is referring to specifically Jesus, since he was born of a woman and blah, blah, blah. So Jesus will crush the head of the serpent. Jesus will defeat Satan.
Yeah.
That's what this is a prophecy of. Jesus will defeat Satan. He will crush the head of the serpent. Now, that actually requires the Masoretic text to validate that reading, because the Septuagint says this, and I will put enmity between you and between the woman and between your offspring and between her offspring. He will watch your head, and you will watch his heel.
Watch.
Huh. Like watch.
It's so funny. I saw some sermon, like a podcast with a guy who's using such poetry to describe this prophecy and acting like, on the cross, his feet, and him getting nailed, but he crushes the serpent in the process, and he's like going into this whole like deep interpretive model, and you're like, well, the Masoretic just has him watching it. You know what I mean? Like,
no, the Septuagint.
Oh, Septuagint. Sorry,
the Masoretic is the one that has "He will crush your head." Yeah.
Interesting how they bounce back and forth on this. Yeah.
All right. Let's look at another example. I have 5 examples here.
Okay.
So Hosea 11:1, that is one that is, I think, a very clear example of a verse that was taken right out of context and applied to Jesus. When if you just look at the verse itself, it is so clearly not about Jesus. So it says, this is the verse that apologists say predicts that Jesus would be whisked out of Israel and taken to Egypt as a baby to escape the massacre of children by Herod, right? So it says that he will spend some time in Egypt, right? That's what they say. And they quote, out of Egypt I called my son. But the actual verse, if you read the whole verse, it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. So it's clearly referring to Israel. And it's calling Israel God's son in a poetic way, in a personification sense. And it's referring to Israel being rescued, delivered out of Egypt during the Exodus. So that's clearly what's going on here. But if you take that line, and out of Egypt I called my son, if you take that out by itself, it seems like a prophecy. But not when you look at the Septuagint. Because when you look at the Septuagint, it says, "For Israel was an infant, and I loved him, and out of Egypt I recalled his children." So it doesn't even have that line that you can take out of context anymore. It says children.
So it's not even his son. It's their children. That's
So it can't be about Jesus. If this is the correct reading, then there's no part of this verse. Out of Egypt I recalled his children. There's no part of this verse that could be interpreted as just being specifically about Jesus.
So real quick, before we get to Zechariah and further one, someone said we're doing clickbait with this title. They said, no, he didn't fulfill any prophecy. You made it up that he fulfilled one. That is clickbait. So can you address that real quick and just say, like, don't tell him maybe, are we looking forward to one that he does fulfill or what?
Right. So when I've been examining this, the main thing that I look for when I look at these passages is two things. Number one, are these real prophecies? Are these actual prophecies about the Messiah, or are they taken out of context? Are they just, like, for example, Hosea 11:1 is not a prophecy about the Messiah at all. It's not even a prophecy. It's just talking about the Exodus. So first of all, is it a prophecy about the Messiah? And second, is it describing something that you could say that Jesus probably fulfilled or probably does apply to Jesus, like historically, So when I've looked at all of these, I've only found one verse that really checks both boxes. But it's still, we'll get into that later.
So it's not a complete. So we're not clickbaiting completely here.
We're not clickbaiting completely. There is one that I think checks both boxes, but we're gonna get into that.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, please. You're not gonna want to miss it. All right. Okay, Zechariah 11:13. We already looked at that. That's the one where, of course, you have to rely on the Masoretic, that variant Masoretic reading that's only in the Masoretic, which says potter. And if you look at the Septuagint, it says furnace. You will, throw them in the smelting furnace. And then Zechariah 12:10. This one's interesting because this is the one where Christians they get two main things out of this. One, this is referring to Jesus being stabbed by the Roman soldier while he was on the cross to make sure he was dead and stuff. And then, in the Gospel of John, water and blood flows out of his side and all that. But they're also saying that the grammar implies that it's God being stabbed in this verse. So it says, when they look on me, on him whom they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child. So the one speaking is God. And so when they look on me, when it says when they look on me, it's saying that God is the one being pierced. But let's turn to the Septuagint here. For Zechariah 12:10, it says, and they shall look to me because they have danced triumphantly. That's what the Septuagint says. They shall look to me because they have danced triumphantly.
Bro, are we reading different books? I mean, like, these books are so different.
Nothing about being stabbed. And okay, so admittedly, the Septuagint wording here is very weird. It uses a word that is difficult to translate. And so different scholars have translated it in different ways. Thompson translated it in 1808. They will look to me whom they jeered. Basically they're mocked. Yeah. And Brenton, of course, that's the one that most people use. The Brenton translation says, and they shall look upon me because they have mocked me. So the idea, this is kind of an interpretation that the word means that mocking. And then Oxford 2007 says, and they shall look to me because they have danced triumphantly. That's the one I just read. And then the Lexham 2019, this is a Christian translation of the Septuagint. It says, they will look attentively to me because they have danced triumphantly. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh.
But that's not the most interesting one, in my opinion. The most interesting one, the one where we can see the Septuagint is really not the Christian apologist friend, is Daniel 9. Now, this is, of course, one of the big ones that, remember, James Rochford said this is one of the main ones. Like, if you're going to pick 3 of the best, most compelling prophecies, Daniel 9, that's the one, along with Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, that's one of the big ones, most important. Daniel 9:25. So for those who don't know, this is the 70 weeks prophecy, which is supposedly a timeline of 483 years from the starting point, which is usually regarded as the 5th century BCE, to the death of Jesus, right? So this is supposed to be a timeline that predicts exactly when Jesus would die. And Christian interpreters say that it predicts the exact year that he died, all right?
You want me to share that graph?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. I just want people to be able to see what you put together for this. So don't mind me, bro. Don't mind me.
This is, but no, we're not there yet.
Okay.
That'll be right after this. But first, I want to talk about what the Septuagint says. So the Masoretic text says it gives 7 weeks, then 62 weeks, and then a last week. So this is a period of 70 weeks, split into 3 parts, right? The Septuagint gives a different number of weeks. Now, a week is 7 years in this passage. So 70 weeks is 490 years. But the Septuagint says, instead of 62 weeks, it says 7 and 70 and 62 weeks. Now, that adds up to, I believe,
973 years.
973 years, yeah. 973 years. So the Septuagint would have, if the Septuagint is the right translation, that would have the Messiah's death in 528 AD.
So who's the candidate in 500 AD? You know?
Yeah, I have no idea. That's 500 years after Jesus. But anyway, so my message to Christians, the takeaway from this, the bottom line, I would say, is just be aware of the Septuagint. The Septuagint does not always give you the translation that you want. Like, don't overinflate the Septuagint's authority and reliability. I mean, it is a good source, that's for sure. It is very helpful to have, but there are definitely places where it's probably wrong. And it's definitely not your friend when it comes to these passages.
Absolutely. And do you want me to show this here, this chart?
All right. So the next point, the next flaw, the next fatal flaw with the prophecies argument is internal disagreements about interpretation. All right.
So you don't want to look at the graph I'm showing. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Don't show this.
Well, you can show the slide that introduces number 4 if you want, but so that's the Septuagint's translation. What it says when it says the Messiah, well, it doesn't say the Messiah, but if you regard it as a prophecy of the Messiah, it says that he's going to be cut off in 528 AD, because that's 973 years after, whatever, if you use the common Christian starting point of 445 BC, 973 years after that is the 6th century.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah. So now we're getting to number 4. You didn't care to cover like the timeline of Daniel in this episode.
Yes, I will cover the timeline of Daniel. Yes. But first, I just want to read a couple quotes here. So Daniel 9, again, is one of the biggest prophecies that Christian apologists are very insistent on, that this is supernatural. You can't possibly explain this away. This is so accurate, so precise. It has to be proof that Jesus is the Messiah. And I'll just read you a couple of quotes here from Fred John Meldau, who's an apologist from the 50s and 60s, and Mark Hitchcock, who's from more recent, like the 2000s. So Meldau says, and so the time given by Daniel from the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, works out perfectly to the very day. This is a prophecy as detailed as a roadmap with not a taint of uncertainty. It is a prediction which can be conclusively proven. It points unerringly to Jesus of Nazareth, who was the Messiah, the Prince, who was cut off by a violent death, but not for himself. And then Mark Hitchcock says, the precision with which this prophecy was fulfilled is staggering. That's why I call it the greatest prophecy ever given. Mark Hitchcock says it's the greatest prophecy ever given. It stands as a monumental proof of the inspiration of the Bible. So you can see there's a lot of confidence here from the apologists regarding this prediction. And let's see. Okay, so when I looked into this, I quickly realized something that people don't really talk about very much, which is that there are two different interpretations about when the 70 weeks begins by modern apologists. So go ahead and go to the next slide real quick. Okay, so there are four possible starting points that have been advocated by various interpreters of Daniel, either apologists or secular scholars, but most apologists regard D, the warrant to Nehemiah, as the one that they believe is the real starting point. So the 70 weeks has to begin at a specific point in history, which is a point where there was a going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. That's Daniel 9:25. So they interpret this going forth of the word as the warrant given to Nehemiah by Artaxerxes the first to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. That's what they believe. But there are quite a few apologists who actually think it refers to the decree of Artaxerxes in his seventh year, the seventh year of Artaxerxes, which was in 458 BC. So the warrant to Nehemiah, that's in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. So it's a 13-year difference. So when Fred Meldau said it works out perfectly to the very day, well, it turns out that there's quite a bit of disagreement. Some apologists think that there's a 13-year disagreement here.
Right.
Some apologists think it's in 458, and some think it's in 445. So it's not to the day, because there's different interpretations. And go to the next slide. Okay, that's yeah. Well, why don't we pull up the chart now of the timeline?
Okay.
That way viewers can see it. Okay, so there are four main views about when the 70 weeks begins. The terminus a quo, the beginning point. When the going forth of the word, what does that refer to? Well, the first view is that it refers to the start of the exile, when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple in 586 BC, and under Nebuchadnezzar, because that's the point in time where Jeremiah receives a prophecy from God, supposedly, that Jerusalem would be restored at a certain point in the future. and that's where Jeremiah gives his 70 years prophecy. So he's told by the angel that 70 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, Jerusalem would be restored. It actually ended up being 47 years, not 70 years, but that's, whatever. That's a whole different thing.
Right.
So the second view is that it refers to the decree of Cyrus, which allowed the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem, and then rebuild the temple and restore the city. And this is the biggest human decree. If we're thinking that that going out of the word is a human decree, Cyrus's edict was probably the most important one, which allowed which allowed Jerusalem to be rebuilt, because it allowed the exiles to return, ended the captivity. And then there's the two at the end. You see those two, C and D. Those are the two points that most apologists think are the real starting points of Daniel 9. Most apologists favor D, the last one, although there are quite a few apologists, including Michael Brown, who favors C. So, all right.
So there's a visual just to give you the different 4 main different ones.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're back to this, the prophetic year hypothesis.
Yeah. Right. So the fourth view, the one that regards the warrant given by Artaxerxes as the terminus a quo for the 70 weeks prophecy, that one kind of has a little mathematical problem, which is that it doesn't, if you use regular years, it gets you past Jesus' death by like 10 years. It gets you to like 40 AD. So in order to make this work, apologists have to change what they mean by a year. They can't mean, a year is 365 days. So they change it to 360 days. And they refer to this as a prophetic year. And
knock off 5 days per year.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And that adjusts it just enough to make it to make the end of the timeline, well, not the end, but the end of the 62 weeks right at Jesus' death, or close enough to Jesus' death in the 30s. But here's the thing. The prophetic year hypothesis is very flimsy, and there's not very much evidence that it was used the way that apologists are using it for this prophecy claim. There's passages in the Bible that seem to regard months as being 30 days, rather than so 30-day months rather than 31-day months. And that's in the flood story and in Revelation and stuff. And so they kind of take that literally, hyper literally, and they say, okay, well then I guess if months are 30 days and only 30 days, then a whole year must only be 360 days. For the biblical authors, or at least for some biblical authors. But the problem is that it didn't really work like that. And I have a quote from J. Barton Payne here that
I could read it. Encyclopedia Bible Prophecy, page 386.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to read it?
Sure. It says dispensational writers usually begin with the decree granted to Nehemiah in 444 so as to bring the date later to Christ's triumphal entry. But such a point of departure takes its 10 years too far. So a shortened prophetic year of 360 days is sometimes introduced. But the total calendar was always kept oriented to the solar and agricultural year by adding 5 or 6 days at the end of a year, or at the latest, a 13th intercalculated month after several years.
Yeah. So J. Barton Payne is, for those who don't know, he's a big deal as far as apologetic writers go. He wrote the Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy, which was a hugely important work. He wrote that in the 70s, and that's the first book that actually like gave a whole huge list of over 100 prophecies that supposedly Jesus fulfilled. And he disagrees with this prophetic year idea. So this is one of the top dogs in apologetics, saying the prophetic year thing is BS, basically.
Yeah. Seems like Brown is on board with it too. Michael Brown, you said, scholars today almost without exception and with complete justification reject the view that Daniel's 70 weeks of years are to be calculated based on the alleged 360-day prophetic year.
Yeah. And then, you compare that with apologists like Eaton Barr and James Rochford, who just say, we shouldn't use our calendar system in determining this prophecy. Instead, we should look to the Bible and find their calendar system. And then it says, when we adjusted 360 years, we see that Daniel predicted the coming of the Messiah to 32 CE. And, they just kind of take this for granted. Like, of course, we should adjust the years so that the prophecy works.
Of course. By the way, I didn't see this 11 months. Wendy, Wendy Bird, thank you so much for being here. I didn't realize you remember almost a whole year now. So if we calculate that based on 30-day months. Okay, sorry. So thank you so much, Wendy. Appreciate it.
That'll shave off, a couple weeks or something. I don't
know. So you're saying that ultimately the Christians who might be screaming in the chat, not happy with what they heard, you're saying take it up with Christians, because even the Christians themselves have recognized that 360-day year doesn't work.
Michael Brown and Barton Payne, these are and Walter Kaiser. He wrote a major book, The Messiah in the Old Testament. He's considered high authority on the topic of messianic prophecies, and he's an apologist. He's a conservative. So so these are conservative Christians, even evangelical apologists, and they agree that the prophetic year idea is just it's not feasible, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why they prefer the third option, C, which we showed on the chart. The date of what was it, 458, around 458 or 457 BC, which dates to Artaxerxes' 7th year, and that's referring to the warrant, the decree given in Ezra 7, I think. So anyway, there's disagreements between apologists about which date is the starting point. So if an apologist ever acts like, oh, we know for certain this is the starting point of Daniel's 70 weeks, well, I'm sorry, but you got lots of other apologists, fellow apologists, who disagree with that interpretation.
Right. And
it's kind of funny to read where they also refute each other often when in these books that they write. Michael Brown explains why he doesn't agree with 445 or 446 as the starting point. He says, the commission of Artaxerxes 1 and 446 BC and Nehemiah 2, the biggest problem with this view is that it is hard to imagine that this commission, hardly even a royal edict, would have been recognized as the terminus a quo of the prophecy. It would have been all too easy to overlook this commission. So basically, Brown here, Michael Brown, is saying this it's like nothing. It was such a minor. It's not even an edict. It's like just a little
they're searching for anything to calculate in that. Yeah. That's why. Yeah.
The starting point of this major timeline is going to be something so minor like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I have here also, I did a lot of research into this, but these are the scholars who have both views. So on the one side, we have the interpretation of the 7th year of Artaxerxes, the 20th year of Artaxerxes, the one that requires the prophetic years, right? These are the scholars who hold that view, and then this is the 7th year of Artaxerxes, the Ezra 7 view, and the scholars who believe that that's where the starting point is. So there are a lot of Christians on both sides who regard regard these two opposing interpretations as the real one, as the real starting point.
Don't you love that they're all really later too, though? I mean, because the critical scholars I've talked to go back further. You know what I mean? They clearly look back to either Isaiah and his prophecy, or Jeremiah's 70 weeks, or they go to the initial Cyrus the Great, the Messiah himself as one of the starting point periods. And it's like, and that would land around Antiochus IV Epiphanes, which just so happened to be a significant time that critical scholars think this book was written around, at least roughly around that time.
Right. The earliest, the Jeremiah one, which was interpretation A, that one does get you pretty close to Antiochus Epiphanes.
Right.
Give or take a few decades, but Christian apologists say that can't be the right one because it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up exactly right, and but here's the thing: why are we expecting it to add up exactly right?
Well, that's the other problem. Is like, do we honestly think this guy Daniel even had that ancient history down to the chronology, like the perfect date to a T? He may not have had that figured out. Just the same reason he had historical figures off, like he didn't quite get all of those details correct. And you just go read some of the experts. We've done interviews with several, but you just got to go open the books. Anyway, I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to say about this, and this is the I told you I had a bombshell about Daniel 9 that I wanted to bring up. Now this is something I just discovered like a week ago, right?
Yes.
So, okay, the most popular interpretation of Daniel 9 is that it goes back to the time of Nehemiah, right? That the starting point is the time of Nehemiah when he's about 445 BC, and then you use the prophetic years to get to Jesus in like 32 AD, right? That's the common popular one that like 90% of apologists go with. That interpretation is only about 130 years old. That one actually goes back to this what's his name, Sir Robert Anderson. He wrote a book called The Coming Prince in 1894, and he's the one who actually came up with that idea, and he came up with the prophetic years thing to make sure that it that math adds up right. Before that, the most common view for like 200 years was that it was the Ezra decree in 458. The one that's now a minority view that's still held by like Walter Kaiser and Michael Brown and J. Barton Payne, but the dominant interpretation now by most apologists only goes back to like 130 years ago, right? And before that, most apologists, most Christian interpreters regarded the other one, the interpretation C, as the correct starting point. So this changed. I mean, it changed very recently. Like it's crazy to think that that the dominant interpretation now that apologists say is like the absolute, like unquestionable, has to be this point in time. That's the starting point. That is so recent. It's just a little over 100 years old.
Right.
Yeah. And then
now you have some fathers too, right? That you wanted to bring into this.
Oh yeah. But first, I also wanted to mention that before about the 1700s, the interpretation again changed to the decree of Cyrus. the writers that I find, like, for example, John Calvin's commentary, he thinks that it's the decree of Cyrus that is the starting point. So this changed like twice. All right, it changed twice in the past like 500 years. You know, the dominant Christian interpretation of when the starting point is actually supposed to be, you know, for the past past 100 years, it was D, and then, you know, 200 years, for the 200 years before that, it was C, and then, you know, for another 200 years before that, it was B.
Yeah, and to show people again. So again, we need to visualize that one more time, because the last time you spent some time making this chart, the last time I'm going to show it. But again, if you want to just get an idea, let me drop that again here. This one right here, D on the right, last 130 years. Yes. This one has been the interpretation. Yes. Before that, 200 years, C. Before that, John Calvin and et cetera, the Protestants and whatnot, B.
Let me put it this way. If you took a time machine and you went back to the 1800s and you asked any Christian apologist, any biblical scholar who believed in Jesus, you know, Bible believing Christian, when does Daniel's 70 weeks start? They would say it starts in the 7th year of Artaxerxes, in 458, 457. They would not say it starts in 445. Nobody thought that. Literally nobody thought that before Sir Robert Anderson came up with that idea and then used the prophetic years. If you went back 500 years in time, took a time machine, went back 500 years, like the dominant view, you know, during the Protestant Reformation was that it refers to Cyrus, Cyrus's decree, the, you know, interpretation B. So this view about when the starting point of Daniel's 70 weeks is supposed to be, it has shifted over the past like 1,000 years, you know?
Absolutely. Real quick, we got a super chat. Thank you so much, Doc Pleroma, not in the house, being a member too. Thank you so much, Doc. Appreciate the love and support. Here's my take. Daniel 9's anointed one cut off preserves trauma over Onias III so deeply that later Jesus readings worked because Christianity inherited an already martyred high priest template.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the original author of Daniel was referring to Onias III as the anointed one cut off, because Onias III was the high priest in 171. He was executed by the Greeks, or not the Greeks, but the Hellenistic Seleucids.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot there, Doc. I agree. I think there's so much here. Sorry to interrupt, but I really appreciate the super chats, and they keep us alive here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, the view has changed over the past 500 years or so, twice. And then if you go back to the early church fathers, the earliest church fathers, they have all kinds of different interpretations on when the 70 weeks begins. The first church father who identifies Daniel 9 as a prophecy of Jesus is Tertullian in the late 2nd century or early 3rd century. All right. So Tertullian was about 200 AD, basically. He's the first one that we know of, that we have, as far as I can tell. He's the first one to interpret Daniel 9 as a prediction about when Jesus would die. What is Tertullian's interpretation of the beginning of the 70 weeks? He says it's the decree of Cyrus.
So he would share in common with. Okay, so Calvin and him share this at least.
Yes, yeah. Tertullian's the first one who dates it to Cyrus. Who comes up with the idea that this is a prophecy of Jesus. He's the first one that we know of, and his interpretation. If we're gonna, if the oldest tradition has any authority here, then the Cyrus decree is the right one. I mean, because that goes back to the earliest church father who commented on this. So when it really drives me crazy when Christian apologists act like it's like their interpretation is like absolute and certain. Obviously it dates to the time that I want it to date to.
Right.
If you just look at the text, it's so clear. Daniel 9:25, the wording is so clear. It could only be referring to the edict of, Artaxerxes or whatever. But the thing is, the interpretation has changed throughout the history of Christian exegesis of this passage. And the earliest Christian interpreter, who is Tertullian, he thinks that it's Cyrus's decree. And Eusebius also believed that it was Cyrus's decree. We have the quotes up here. Let's see. Yeah. So Tertullian says we ought to calculate from the first year of Darius when Daniel saw this vision. Obviously, Daniel and Darius, of course, Darius is a big problem in the book of Daniel, but for Christian apologists who think that Darius was a real figure, they, of course, date him at the same time as Cyrus. So Daniel's vision would date to 539, the same year that Cyrus gave the edict that released Jews from captivity. And then Eusebius says in the weeks of years make 483 years added together from the reign of Cyrus up to the Roman Empire. They actually don't, but that was his interpretation. But like you said, the ancient writers were not that great at getting the chronology right.
Right.
Perfectly right. They were slightly inaccurate. They were often off by decades, actually.
And think about it like this too. Do they honestly think their audience will know how to fact check this? Hell no. So they don't need to be as precise. This is the same problem I have with Luke Acts borrowing from Josephus and getting precise numbers and all that, or even the chronology. Luke's not overly concerned about being precise on chronology or numbers. He doesn't expect his audience to know this information and to be able to fact check him. He's much more theologically minded anyway. So, and I think Daniel would be too. Their goal isn't like, I want to be hyper scientific and precise about the exact years that go back here and you can go fact check me. They're much more like giving you hope in the current state of events, likely writing to an audience around the 2nd century BCE that are dealing with the crisis that's happening under Antiochus IV Epiphanes and stuff. So there's much, I mean, I just think people make a little too much out of the absolute precision, but I do think that the other apologists have a point. Who the hell would start on a thing that's so insignificant like D, what you showed on the, clearly it would have been more important than that,
The starting point of this major timeline, why would Daniel pick such a minor event that you could easily pass over without finding it important or significant at all. And then, apologists will quibble over the wording and say, the specific wording about what the word going out involves and everything. That, of course, it has to point to this point or this point, So, but there were so many different interpretations, and the church fathers. So I actually looked at 6 different church fathers who commented on Daniel 9. Tertullian starts the timeline 539 BC. Clement starts the timeline 560 BC. Hippolytus starts the timeline 586 BC, which is closer to the modern secular starting point.
Right.
Julius Africanus is the only one that actually starts the timeline at 445 BC, which modern apologists now regard as the right starting point. That goes back to Julius Africanus, but he was the only one. Eusebius then after him dates it to 539, same as Tertullian, and then Theodoret 552. So Africanus was the only one who regarded the starting point as 445 BC, which is what almost all apologists now think that's the right starting point. But you see there's a diversity of interpretations.
Yeah.
In the first 500 years of Christian history, and they were trying to find the right starting point to make it add up to Jesus, basically. And they were trying different things and different interpretations. And then in the modern era, where we have better history and chronology, Christians have settled on these two interpretations, which get the timeline to Jesus, or close enough to Jesus.
Let me ask you something. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
We are now approaching flaw number 5. There's 12, and it's 2 hours in. Let me ask you this. I want to pitch something to you, because I already did a recording earlier for a couple hours. If you would be down for doing a part 2 to this, because I really think, I don't want to sell you short, because if we keep going, I'm not going to lie, bro. I'll probably within 60 minutes, like I'll be pushing. I'll be like, okay. And I feel like we can keep going into these weeds that we've been going into even greater in a following episode in a week or two, or whenever a window opens for you and me, and we can fix the date. Because, dude, I'm going to be real with you. Like, we didn't even go exhaustive, of course, but like we've been going into the weeds on the 4 examples we've gone through right now. And I'm like, I don't want to soften the approach. I want to be precise and go into greater depth. And of course, have a deeper live stream in the future covering the rest of these examples. Would you be interested in doing something like that?
Yeah, sure. That actually sounds like a good idea. But I also have something else.
Okay.
Because I was thinking that we could get into Isaiah 53 real quick for just a few minutes.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then right after that, we can answer the question of the live stream, the one prophecy that Jesus may be fulfilled.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, real quick, hey, Baron, thank you. 35 months flexing on us hard. Keep up the work. Thank you for being a member of the channel. Really appreciate that. And someone said I'm burnout. Yeah, you could say I am a bit burnout, but here's the reason. I know I don't want to push 2 more hours and then it not be all my enthusiasm and energy into this, because Stephen, there's so much more that we can get into in greater depth. So please take us into Isaiah 53. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just being honest about how I wouldn't want to push you like another 60 minutes. All right, man, let's wrap things up. I really want to get into these weeds.
Right. All right. So we're just gonna go through this, and then we
is it in the charts? Is it one of the slides that I should pull up?
I think I sent you. Wait. Let me
see. Is it? It's.
Okay. Oh yeah, the 43. Right.
This one, right?
Yes. So.
Okay.
Remember when we discussed earlier about how Christian apologists stretch out the verses into 300 prophecies, and we talked about how they stretch out Isaiah 53 into 43 prophecies.
Yes, so, right here.
I wanted to go through these 43 briefly, just one at a time, just kind of rapid fire, and ask this question. Ask the question of, is this prediction like a historically verifiable prediction? Is it something that like we could check and see this is true or false? Or is it like an opinion or a theological claim, Right. So let me just pull up real quick.
I have the chart that shows like, let me show you this chart, because I know that we have the PowerPoint, but this one seems, it might be harder for them to read, but this one, and I wish I could zoom in, but this one really shows like all the lists that you.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that? That's too small, right?
Yeah, it's all right. I have it on my phone here.
Okay.
You can't zoom in. I mean, if you zoomed in a little bit, that might.
Dude, I got this new computer, just came in. I'm not sure how to zoom in on this. Right. It doesn't give me a zoom in option on the top yet.
I don't know. Maybe they could see this.
Let me make you full screen.
It's probably backwards, right?
No, it's fine.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
Yeah, we can see it.
So this is the first 6 or 7 prophecies, and then these are all the rest. all the rest. This is all Isaiah 53. All right.
Right.
This is how much they stretch out Isaiah 53 to make the 300 prophecies list. Right. Like, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just thought it'd be fun to go through each of these and just say, okay, for example, first one, the servant exalted. Is that a historically verifiable claim or theological?
The what?
The servant exalted. That's the first one.
Dude,
the servant,
if you take it literally, like literally without theology, and you were just to go back and like see this guy who's like poor running around preaching and then gets killed, no one outside of the movement who isn't already thinking of the mythology of this belief system is going to think he got exalted at all. Like they're going to look at him and go, no, he got buried. You know what I mean?
You've got to be a Christian already, basically.
You've got to be a Christian.
This is a fulfilled prophecy. Yes,
right,
Jesus was exalted.
It's theology. Yeah.
Right. That's theology. These are lists that I'm getting basically from online websites
from Christians.
Christian websites. Like for example, the Clint Byers is one of them. He lists like 350 or 360 prophecies. Anyway, next one. This is literally what it says on the list. Behold my servant. That's the prediction. See? Behold my servant. That's number 2.
Like that's so vague as well. Like what the hell?
That's not even a prediction at all. Okay. Sorry, the third one. The servant shockingly abused.
The servant what?
The servant shockingly abused. He was so marred. Blah, blah, blah.
I mean, he gets his ass kicked. Yeah.
Okay, so that's historically verifiable. Okay. The nations startled by his message.
Not in his life. I mean, maybe you could go the nation you said, or nations?
Nations startled by his message.
They would say theologically, look at what happened in history or something. You know what I mean? Like you could try to interpret that like as in
possibly. I mean, that's at least historically verifiable, right? That's something that we could check and say, okay, maybe that was fulfilled, maybe not.
You could try to make a case that like, okay,
we'll be generous and say, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And then his blood shed atonement for all. Historically verifiable?
Hell no.
No. Atonement for all. That's okay. His people would not believe in him.
I mean, that's an easy one. You know how many cult leaders don't have their own family believe in them? Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. He grew up in a poor family. That's the next one.
I think that's there are some people who question that, right? Because supposedly if he's saying what he's saying and they're like, he seems kind of learned. But I'll go with he's poor for fine. Sure. Screwed. If he's from Nazareth,
he wasn't like an aristocrat or something.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Appearance of an ordinary man.
Bro.
That literally applies to like
every man in the world, just about.
Okay, and this is funny. The next 2 are despised and rejected. Those are 2 different fulfillments.
Raise a hand in the audience right now if you've been despised or rejected in your life, and you know what I'm saying? Anyway. Okay.
Great sorrow and grief.
I would imagine so. If you grant the guy on the cross really is crying out what he's crying out, that's a question mark as well. But I think that you ever seen that guy Osho? He was like a cult leader too, but it was like a part of like a mystical cult. Anyway, he talks about how Jesus in his final seconds might have thought he believed in God. His father was supposed to rescue him. And then in his final moments on the cross, he realized nobody's coming to rescue him. And he must have had an existential crisis. So he cries out, "Why have you forsaken me?" Now, if you take that historical, then sure. But like, that
assumes there was someone there, to hear Jesus' last words.
What'd you say? Say it like, okay, hold on, write this down. Father, why have you? Okay.
Holding a wax tablet as Jesus is dying. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, next one. Men hide from his association. Probably historically verifiable, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they're trying not to get them, trying to be seen in a negative light, for some reason the cult put off bad vibes, they might.
Yeah. He would have a healing ministry.
I mean, according to the text, this is a debated one on whether or not this guy was doing like kind of what we would say, TV preachers are doing. Are they running around really healing people, or is it literary? And
he was known as a healer. He had a reputation.
Yes, he was known as that, at least as far as we have written records. And one of the things that makes me think there might be something historical, at least behind it, is in Mark. He goes to try and heal, but he can't. He can't. Yeah. So it's like
he had to try twice. He had to try twice. Those are two separate instances. There's one where he couldn't heal anybody in a city because of their unbelief. Right. And then there's another instance where he has to try twice to heal a blind man.
Yeah. So that kind of made me go like, damn, is this a memory behind it? Like Jesus was really running around trying to do stuff. Hold on. Damn it. Tell her to believe. Pull the leg. Okay. Like get her to buy into it. I don't know. Anyway.
There were lots of healers like Hanina Bendoza and other Jewish healers, miracle workers like Honi the circle drawer, for example.
Yeah.
Thought to be cursed by God. That's the next one.
I mean,
historical.
That sounds theological.
I think what it's saying is, people regarded him as cursed by God because he was crucified.
Again, that still sounds theological to me. That they would think he was cursed.
Yeah,
that's like step on a crack, break your mama's back kind of thing. Like, look what happened to him, therefore he must be cursed. Maybe people thought that about him, but I don't know. Yeah.
And then bears penalty for man's sin.
That's theology.
Theological. Peace between man and God.
Theology.
His back would be whipped. Historical.
I mean, if you grant the flogging,
Sin bearer for all mankind.
Hell no.
Theological. God's will to bear man's sin.
I mean, what are we doing?
Not only is that theological, but that's just repeating the last one. So there's sin bearer for all mankind, and then God's will to bear man's sin. That's two separate things, two separate items on this.
Yeah.
All right, oppressed and afflicted.
Sure, historical.
Okay, sure. Yeah. That happens.
But I mean, you kind of have to ask yourself, is death by cop oppressed? Because I do have serious questions about him intentionally trying to martyr himself historically. Yeah. So when you say you're oppressed, are you actively trying to receive oppression from people will give it if you're actually trying to cause it? Yeah. So is it a self-infliction of oppression? You know what I mean? What's going on?
There's definitely things that you can do that will carry a high risk of bringing up.
What's that noise? Backlash. Are you putting something in front of the microphone?
Oh, sorry, I was using this.
Oh, I could hear okay,
sorry about that.
So you're good. Okay, sorry. Please continue.
All right, and then silent before his accusers.
I mean, bro, I feel like a lot of these you can play the game of did it happen, or is this part of fulfilling scripture that you do see him silent in other situations? You also see other figures like Jesus ben Ananias silent before his accusers, and this is in the Josephus literature, right, where he doesn't say a word, and then he's silent for years, and then the day comes, woe to you, woe to you, woe to you. So is that a scriptural nod? Is this some kind of fulfillment of scripture and therefore theological, or was he really silent before his accusers? I don't know, but it's also not a miraculous claim at all either. Lots of people can be silent in front of people accusing them. Just saying.
Yeah. All right. Let's go through the rest real quick.
Okay.
All right. Where were we? Sacrificial lamb.
Theology.
Yeah. Confined and persecuted.
It's already said that 3 times already in this.
I know, you know what I'm saying? Ones. Like I said, there's so much fluff, repeated in the same passage. Yeah. He would be judged. Sure, right?
What is this? Go ahead.
Stricken and crucified.
We've already covered practically.
The thing is, it says crucified here, but Isaiah 53 doesn't say that. Crucified.
Exactly.
But anyway. Let's just say, okay, sure. But Isaiah doesn't say that. Dies for the sin of the world. Again, it's the same thing repeated. It's been repeated 5 times now.
Yeah.
Buried in a rich man's grave. Yeah.
I personally
Mhm.
don't. I mean, I think I think they're inventing a legend.
Yeah.
But but here's the thing, even if they did
Mhm.
potentially, I still think they flowered or colored the narrative, even if he was buried in a tomb.
Yeah.
Historically, I just think the narrative is working overtime to do theology much more than history. So
Right. No deceit in his mouth. That's more
uh,
of an opinion, right?
you
No
miss innocent had done no
Oh,
violence.
yeah, innocent had done no violence, yeah.
I don't know, man. Whipping a bunch of people out of a temple,
Yeah,
is
that
kind of
but here's the thing, though, he broke the law, you know? Technically,
yeah.
he broke the Roman law by claiming to be the Messiah. If he
Right.
did claim to be the Messiah, then the Roman law actually says that that's again, you get crucified if you claim to be a king and you're not appointed by Caesar, then you're breaking the law and you get crucified. So
Right.
saying he's innocent, I mean, that's definitely an opinion, really. It's very debatable
Yeah.
because he did break the law and he got executed for breaking the law,
Yeah, I mean, but even then, the cleansing of the temple,
Mhm.
I've been on the Temple Mount area.
Mhm.
It's enormous. When I say
Yeah.
enormous, there are questions of him being by himself. I very much doubt this guy was alone. I think he brought his whole mob, and I think that if he did historically go and cleanse the temple, there was
Mhm.
a riot practically involved. I cannot imagine this was a peaceful protest that like one dude
Yeah.
walked in there and they allowed him to. No, he'd have got caught on the spot. They'd have killed him same day, same time. Like it would
Mhm.
have been, he'd have been in trouble right then. So
Yeah.
if he did that, there was violence involved. There's no way you could subdue that large of an area with it
Yeah.
having temple guards and the whole nine there. No
Mhm.
doubt, that cannot. If there is any history there, he
Mhm.
was violent in that situation. I cannot imagine there was not something involved that was
Mhm.
violent and breaking the law. Like, can you honestly say walking into a temple, the holy grounds of a sanctuary like that, and
Yeah.
committing that, doing what it says, isn't breaking the law?
Mhm.
Have someone go up to the White House and perform this kind of deed, no matter who's the president.
Yep.
And then they get shot or they get subdued and have imprisonment. And then
Mhm.
their cult followers say, but they weren't violent. What are you talking about? And they
Uh-huh.
went in there like punching and kicking and trying to like cause ruckus. Yeah,
Yeah.
they broke a law. They broke a law. So
Yep.
yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, and there's another view that I've heard from people like Bart Ehrman that the temple incident was maybe exaggerated. That it maybe was just a minor disturbance, like he just was performing his one of his prophecies, like the prophecy that the temple will be destroyed, and he was just making kind of like a minor kind of show, just knocking over a few tables and screaming some stuff.
Well, you either have to minimize what he really did,
Yeah.
okay, compared to the text, or you have to realize that they are literally whitewashing a very violent potential situation, that he survived in that situation. If
Yeah.
the story is historical in any way, like and this is why there's the violent Jesus hypothesis, or at least the rebel type, the one that suggests that the Christians are theologically trying to downplay Jesus's role in an uprising, that the Gospels talk about there's an uprising. And if there is, and he had a whole crowd of disciples, people who were carrying around swords, people who were willing to, protect him and also enforce what he's trying to accomplish, and he cleanses the temple, that temple's enormous. I cannot tell you how big that is. We're talking like, if I were throwing a number out there, it's like probably 3 or 4 football fields. Like football fields.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I don't remember what the number was, but it's multiple football fields for sure.
Yeah, it's huge. And one dude going in there. So either he ran in like you're saying and went, stop. All right, guys, I told him, tell them, write this down. I did this big thing.
Yeah.
Or he really went in there with a crowd and it wasn't him alone. And there was something there and they've downplayed it. Some people will just go so far as to say it's not historical. They think it's more symbolic and theological about the temple's destruction, or they find ways to say the account isn't a memory. But if 3 of the Gospels do portray him as getting killed in that, and you grant that there's a historical memory there, he got killed for breaking the law and committing crimes against the sanctuary and being a Messiah-like figure.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you could look at him, you could see why he got arrested and killed. And I would not, on the outside, if I was living back in those days as an average Jew living my day-to-day life, wanting to just go and take care of my family and go feed my kids at home and be there with my wife, and I saw this behavior, I'd probably be like, this guy's a troublemaker. this guy's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, he's a radical.
At the very least, he would be provoking violent reaction from the authorities. He could.
Yeah, he could
endanger everyone by provoking violence from the authorities. Yeah,
I agree.
All right, so no deceit in his mouth. That's the next one, and that's kind of an opinion, right? No that's because if he said, "I'm the Messiah," and you think that that's not true.
Well, if he said, "Some of you standing here will not taste death until the Son of Man comes with his angels, to repay each man," and he was wrong,
well,
then but Christians believe there was no deceit, and non-Christians who don't already drink the Kool-Aid of Jesus don't fall for that and go, "No, I'm sorry, he was wrong. He made mistakes." But I know Christians who do say he was wrong. So, Christian academics. They're
like kind of more secular, liberal,
actual scholars who don't let their theology drive their research.
Yeah. All right, next one. God's will that he die for man.
Theology.
And
unless it's death by cop and he believed it about himself or something, like a martyr, but
an offering for sin.
An offering for sin. Theology.
Resurrected and lives forever.
Capital, all caps, THEOLOGY.
and that's another example of what I mentioned earlier. Like, you can't say that it was fulfilled already, because you can't say that something that's going to happen forever has been fulfilled in the past.
Right.
Anyway, he would prosper.
He got stopped. So what do you mean by prosper here? Like, the guy had money? Like, he made no? So, I mean, I
definitely theology, right? Theology is the only way that you can regard Jesus as being prosperous,
right?
Because he definitely wasn't prosperous from a historical standpoint.
Yeah, exactly.
God's satisfied with his suffering.
Can you imagine? Just think about what that even says.
Yeah.
He's looking down. He's like, bleed, blood, death, die, suffer. Oh, yeah. You feel the pain? I feel much more satisfied now that my son is being slaughtered.
So satisfying.
How disgusting.
I know.
Honestly, can you imagine sending your own child? I mean, you don't have any children yet, but I can tell you this, nothing would satisfy that. That would just honestly horrify me to see my son or my child suffering, and I'm supposed to be satisfied by that. How sick is that?
What if your son was also you?
Okay, now we're getting ridiculous. Yeah. Now we're getting into La La Land. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. God's servants. That's the next one.
I mean, everybody's claiming to be God's servant. You know what I'm saying? Like,
would justify man before God.
Would justify man. I mean, that's theology, like capital T. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The sin bearer
for all mankind.
Bro, they said this 8 times already. Like, dude, we understand what you're trying to say, bro. Like, and you know how much we didn't even stop. How many of these don't actually factor into Isaiah, right? Like, that if we actually went and look anyway, for all mankind.
We're just assuming that Isaiah actually says these things.
We're like,
it's like, all right, exalted by God for his sacrifice.
Dude, you gotta stop, bro. This is ridiculous. Oh my gosh.
Gave his life to save mankind.
Dude, did we not just read this shit like 2 verses before? Like 2.
Oh, okay. The next one is grouped with criminals. Okay. That's
I mean, look, dude, there's a chance if you take the historical, I mean, he's between 2 lestai, right? Like he's grouped with people who committed crimes
with other crucified victims. Yeah.
Which raises a question for me. In thinking, if you're like in a crowd, are you really innocent, or is there some historical memory that he was really part of a group of criminals that got killed, yet the in group is saying he was innocent? No, he was innocent, and they've theologized that. I don't know. I mean,
I've heard. I don't remember who said this, but I've heard some scholars say that it might have been 2 disciples who were crucified with him.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know whether there's good evidence for that or not. But right. There's two left. Okay, the last two. Sin bearer for all mankind.
Bro.
Right. And then last one, intercedes on man's behalf.
I mean, like when I'm not even saying anything anymore, you already know what it is at this point.
So bottom line is Isaiah 53 is it's not just historical. It's a mixed bag. It's got some historical predictions. It's got a lot of theology in it. So
yeah.
So you know, it's really it's kind of up there with you know, Genesis 3:15, you know, where they say that it's a prediction that Jesus would crush the head of Satan, right?
Right.
You can't prove or disprove that historically. That's not verified. That's not a verifiable claim. You know, you can't say, oh, this person, he definitely did crush the head of Satan. I mean, it's documented. You know, there's this archaeological evidence that Satan's head is crushed by this guy. You know, so Isaiah 53 is partly like that, and then partly generic suffering.
Yeah.
That have applied to hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish martyrs throughout history. You know.
Yeah, and how many of those what we grant might be history are then also portrayed in the literature of the New Testament in a way that is trying to model after Scripture. I mean, again, remember there were Jews who were trying to literally live according to these prophets. They're reading Joshua, they're reading these older materials, and they're modeling their life after them. So if, like, imagine we could hypothetically hey, we found lost literature of Theudas, or dude, we found the lost source of the Egyptian, or I don't know, name any prophet that Josephus mentions. Guess what? Watch us check off so many Isaiah 53, you know, checklist historically and theologically. We see both of them at play, and we go, why? Maybe prophets were trying to act this way. Maybe they were martyr-like. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, what if it's not like it doesn't take any supernatural or miraculous thing to find some of the historical lineup happening to people who get themselves killed as prophets who behave this way and do these things. So again, by the way, I got a super chat here real quick before we wrap things up. Vegisa Fool, thank you so much again for the super chat and for being here. God sent his own son. It broke his heart, but that is how he saved the world. He forsaken his only son for us, satisfied, for he saved the world.
Well, I'm glad to see that there are some Christians watching. So that's this person's view, and anyway.
Yeah, again. Look, you know my position. And again, you just heard me describe it. Any father who can watch their son go through that and be okay with it, their ethics, they're more like, it is totally contrary to our perception and understanding in this world. And to make what we would call evil in this world, watching a son be tortured or whatnot, you know, even our guts wrench when we hear Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac, but we're so glad when we hear the angel introduced into the story. And oh, by the way, it's an animal that gets replaced. Wait till animals are, like, to a point, treated life-wise like humans in the minds of humans. And one day we read that story and it's going to be gut-wrenching that even a human, God accepted the animal to be killed instead too. So it's still evil. It's still evil in their minds. So at some point, I hope we get away from thinking killing or sacrificing humans for other humans in this regard is good. I don't think it's good. I could see something of a noble laying down one's life to try and protect your family, protect your kids, but to die on behalf of the sins when God has often forgave sins without blood all throughout Scripture, and yet he prefers to watch and is satisfied by the torturing of his own son. That's insane sounding now. It used to not be, but it sounds a bit insane when you think about it that way.
Yeah, the whole idea of demanding suffering in order to account for, you know, to pay a debt of some kind is just absurd to me. That, you know, that, like, if some harm was done, or if there's some debt owed or something to a deity, how would a person suffering, anyone suffering, whether it's the deity's son or anybody else, how would that suffering make up whatever, loss? Suffering doesn't add value to anything. Suffering is just suffering. It detracts value. I mean, yeah. So
it's wild. Like it is this like punishment you need to get. I'm going to put it on my son.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy to think about, to be honest with you. And then Vegisa Full, thank you so much for the super chat. But they said, come back, Derek. Like, do you hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I don't think they're listening. I think they're just about preaching and trying to convince you instead of hearing the problems I'm raising. Mm-hmm. They don't see it. They see it as all positive and good. And I know, because I've been there. I was there for most of my life. I drank the Kool-Aid. I understood all through the lens of Christianity and to understand how perfect, how beautiful it looks. That God would send a son. Once you stop, you're no longer under the spell of this kind of indoctrination. You can then look at it and go, guess what? If I start talking about another demigod and the sacrificing of their children, you'll be quick to call the evil out. But because it's the Bible and it's your God and it's your religion, it's a blind spot. And I'm saying it's no longer a blind spot the same way I would say about pagan infant sacrifice. That, the Baal, they sacrifice their children. And it's like, bro, your God literally asked Abraham to do that for his son. Last minute, replaced it with an animal, but he didn't do the same for in Judges, Jephthah's daughter. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and then the killing of her took place according to the narrative. Yeah. He did follow through with his vow that the first thing living that walks through my door, I will commit to you. I will.
And God didn't step in. He wasn't like, oh, that's okay. You don't need to do that. You're off the hook.
Exactly. And so the fact that this deity operates on the same framework that Baal operates on, and then continues to take human sacrifice when they go, oh, but he didn't sacrifice his son here. Yet then you cherish and relish the idea that later his only begotten son gets sacrificed. And you're happy about that. You're glad, you think it's good. That is where I'm like, I don't see it that way anymore. And don't ask me to please come home when I'm very happy not thinking that way about the world around me and having this sensitivity ethically that I'm now viewing things like this and going, ho, that's not good. The same way I would apply it on any other cult, Anyway, I'm keeping you
almost done.
Yeah, we're wrapping things up anyway. See, I told you that we needed to wrap it up anyways because I knew this was happening.
So let's just mention that one prophecy that you hinted at in the video in the title. Okay,
did we get is there a slide for that or no?
I don't think
you're just
so.
Gonna tell us. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say it. So like I said, when looking through all these prophecies, I looked for two main criteria, basically two main criteria that is it an actual prophecy? First of all, is it an actual prediction? Is it saying something about what's going to happen to the Messiah? In without being taken out of context. That's number one. And number two, is it something that probably happened to Jesus? And so looking through all these passages, all of these prophecy claims, the only one I found was Malachi 3:1. All right. So Malachi 3:1 says, "See, I am sending my messenger to prepare the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant in whom you delight, indeed he is coming, said the Lord of hosts." So this passage is incredibly vague.
Yeah.
But it does speak about a future figure coming suddenly to the temple. And Jesus did go to the temple.
So it's okay. Okay. Yeah, again, I think there are many situations you could look at as self-prophecies, self-fulfilling prophecies, or even flip a coin. It's going to happen, like some things just happen like we've been talking about. So you're saying that I thought you were going to come up with the verse that says he fulfilled one prophecy for sure, and it's the Deuteronomy 18, I believe it is, where it says that there will be false prophets who will make claims that don't come to pass. Don't fear them.
That's not a messianic prophecy, though. That's the thing.
That's true.
It has to be a messianic prophecy. And Malachi 3:1 it could be interpreted messianically. It was interpreted messianically by some Jews.
Got it.
You know, in like the Talmud and stuff, and it is apocalyptic, and
right.
And so I think that there's enough for us to regard this as a plausible messianic prophecy, and as something that Jesus actually did, which was he did come suddenly to the temple. So those two things, it meets the two, you know, criteria, and that's the only one that I found that actually checks both boxes. But here's the thing. It is so vague that you could also interpret this to be about anyone you can imagine. In fact, this Malachi 3:1 is interpreted by Muslims as a prophecy of Muhammad, and it's interpreted by Mormons as a prophecy of Joseph Smith. So I'm just going to read this one quote from a Muslim from the book, The Bible's Last Prophet. I can't pronounce his name. Faisal Siddiqui. I'm probably butchering the name, but
it's all good.
He said, if Muhammad is the one who prepared the way of the straight and clear path, when did he come suddenly to the Lord's temple? In the event called the Isra, mentioned at the beginning of the section, where Muhammad was taken from the Lord's house in Mecca to the Lord's temple in Jerusalem. Furthermore, Muhammad was indeed the messenger of the covenant of Ishmael. Thus, it can be seen that Muhammad, and only Muhammad, thoroughly and authentically fulfills the biblical description of Malachi 3:1.
Jeez.
So,
well, you know, I have fulfilled this prophecy.
Yeah.
I have literally been, right there at the Wailing Wall, went up into the Temple Mount. I've walked right where they claim the Holy of Holies was located. I was right there at the temple precipice where James was thrown off of. Walked the temple. I was right there at the Dome of the Rock. I've got footage of it. I could prove it to you. So everybody better get their shit straight, because the man with the plan is here. You know what I mean?
You're the messenger of the covenant.
I'm the messenger of the covenant.
That's really about Derek Lambert.
Literally. Vegeta, thank you so much. I find Yahweh so cool. Imagine speaking with him. I imagine being able to speak to Baal and Yahweh and Osiris and you know, the various deities that are all over the ancient world. I just don't have the same perception I once did. That's my point. And I just, you know, I think these are archaic ideas that we need to keep moving forward, and still we can still have fun enjoying this stuff, what we're doing. Like, we're nerding out right now, and I hope people watching will take the time to go subscribe to your YouTube channel. Where is it at here? There it is. Pocket Rebuttals. Oh, wrong one. Here it is.
These are just like, these are like 5-minute videos I made. Like I made these like years ago. They're just kind of, you know, a 5-minute, 3 to 5 minutes long, that show clips from different scholars and experts and various things. I do have a prophecy one there. Did Jesus fulfill prophecies? And I have a bunch of Jewish rabbis talking about that. So, if you're interested, there, you know, it's not a big channel, but
absolutely. And it's interesting to hear Jewish rabbis do that, because they know the Hebrew and they dive into this stuff. Vegeta Full, again, thank you for the super chat. Do you think he is cool? His personality? What do you mean, Yahweh? Like, and there's different portrayals of Yahweh throughout the Bible as well. I think he could be pretty vindictive, and for a deity, he seems very human-like, not very, I'll say, platonic. You know, very anthropomorphic, jealous, angry, hateful, like a war god, like he's pissed off all the time, and then he's happy, but then you mess up and don't keep the Sabbath, and then he just sends a famine to kill 70,000 people, whatever. You know, that seems like pretty vindictive.
I think ancient people just kind of modeled their deities on the typical personalities of human kings that they knew of, you know? The personalities that they observed in their own kings and rulers.
Exactly.
They just kind of made that what their god's, you know, personality was like.
Not the greatest time to be alive. Just keeping it 100. Hey, quick, I need to show people, because I do need to let you go. The Queen of Heaven in your house is calling upon you. And trust me, I get it. She is the most important part of your life. And we obviously need to be mindful of her and respectful of her. Showing people what we didn't cover. Fatal Fall 6, we'll get into historical versus theological. We'll get into.
We actually did that. That was the Isaiah thing. Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
We're done with that one. Yep.
7.
We're over halfway done. Okay.
Yeah, but we could still add more to this, because there's a lot we didn't add. You didn't necessarily put in here. Presupposing the Gospels are accurate, ignoring the context. The dual fulfillment backup plan. God, that's a good one. I love that. Missing the point entirely.
Oh yeah, that's the one where I talk about the anti-messianic prophecy.
The cool thing about us doing another show too is you don't have charts for these yet. This will give you time to put a few of those together. Double standards with other religions, and we need to go over prophecy and other religions when we do, because I think it's important to show people the Oracle of Delphi. I mean, the Sibylline oracles, stuff like that. Like there are prophecies of other religious groups, and I think we had this mindset, or I did, that like only really, and I missed it watching like the movie 300 and other things that I enjoyed along the way. The only people who had prophecy was the Bible. And it's like, no, there's a whole world of prophecy. And then typology, prophecy by matching patterns. Dale C. Allison's book is on my shelf. We can get into all of that. Thank you so much, Stephen. Apologies for keeping you longer than, but let's do this again, man. Any final words from you? Well,
I'm so happy that I finally got to be on your show. This has been an honor being on here, and I hope that your audience enjoyed my my very in the weeds kind of presentation.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, lots of comments, applause. Everybody root Stephen on in the chat and leave him a comment. Go check his YouTube channel out, subscribe, and stay tuned, because Stephen's got something peer-reviewed I can't say much about, or this part of the secret Illuminati society that we can't talk about right now.
Maybe we can have another show about that, or I could mention that in another one.
We need to. We'll get into the weeds on it
once that gets published.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll cover that. We got books on the way. Stay tuned. Show Stephen some love, everybody. He can use all the love he can get. We all can, So that's prophecy, by the way. That one will be loved in the 2026 or something. I think Nostradamus said something like that at one point.
Probably, yeah.
Final words?
That's it. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, and never forget, we are MythVision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.